Hello everyone and Happy New Year for 2023. I woke up this morning and I noticed it was a wee bit icy outside, a wee bit frosty looking for my liking, so I decided to stay indoors. But for me staying indoors all day, what is it should I do? What will I do? So I decided to pick up a report. The report was called Education at a Glance 2022, produced by the Organizational Economic Cooperation and Development. What this organisation does, well, it gathers data from all over the world and from the education systems, and they put that data into tables, graphs and charts, and it allows anybody from any given country to look at the graphs, look at the tables and the charts and see how they are doing compared to other countries, and that gives them insights into what's happening in their country, and they can take things forward via policies and things. So I decided to look through this report to see if I could get any information about Scotland that might help explain why we have got this attainment gap, a poverty-related attainment gap, much worse than it should be. Will this reveal itself in these tables in some way? Well, let's have a look. I looked through the report and I came across this interesting bar graph. Now you notice that Scotland's on the right, separate from the rest. This is because this particular report was printed for the purposes of Scotland. Every other country would have got an identical report, except their country would have been on the right to make it easier for them to compare. When I first saw this, I thought this is pretty cheery stuff. Look at the dark blue bar. It's higher than everybody else's. That's surely a good thing. And look at the wee dot, the wee circle, the wee spot. Slightly lighter blue than the dark blue, and that's higher than everybody else's as well. Surely this is a good thing. Of course, when you look at the latest blue bar, that's not quite as high. So therefore, wait a minute, what's going on here? So what we do is this. When we draw back from the graph and we look at the titles, what the graph is all about, then the true picture emerges. When you look at the headings in this graph, a rather sorrier picture emerges. But nevertheless, it does clarify a few things that we often hear. You've often heard of teachers complaining about being overworked and having lack of time. This graph helps to explain that. 10 or so years ago, we were asked to implement a very ambitious curriculum called the Curriculum for Excellence. This was intellectually and technically very, very challenging for all those involved. Now, I doubt very much if we have managed to implement any more than a mere shadow of that. And I think that's understood and been recognised. This graph here explains why. So let's look at this chart then and see what we can take from it. First of all, the light blue bars. Those represent the total statutory working time in hours. In Scotland, we are legally obliged to work 1,365 hours per year on behalf of the boys and girls, which is less than other countries. But that might be a wee bit misleading though, because we do spend extra hours taking clubs, extracurricular activities, and also simply to survive. We need to spend extra hours preparing. We need to spend extra hours marking. So often many of us will breach that figure and it'll be much, much higher. So that might be a bit misleading. Also, 62.6% of the time of our statutory time is spent teaching, as indicated by the dot, and that's much higher than everybody else, apart from maybe Latvia and Luxembourg. Now, the really significant bar is the dark blue bar. Notice we spend 855 hours per year teaching, and that's higher than other countries, or most other countries anyway, and that's of great and deep significance. Now the height of this bar of 855 hours is actually close to reality. And let me tell you why. You will have noticed that in a 5-day week in Scotland, no, the days are not the same length. Some days are longer than others. You might have 2 long days and 3 short days. You might have 4 long days and a half a day on a Friday. But you might have 2 long days at the beginning of the week and 3 short days at the end of the week. But the days are not the same length. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, why would that be? Well, that's an efficiency measure, you see. It's an efficiency measure. Oh, how does this work then? Well, by keeping the periods to 50 minutes, 50 minutes is an exact multiple of 855 hours. And that's your fact. That is 1026. In other words, because the days are of different lengths, because the times are all 50 minutes, it's very, very possible that many teachers in Scotland are working exactly 1026 periods a year, and not a minute less. And not a minute less. So they've made sure that Scottish teachers are working their 855 hours by manipulating the length of the week, by keeping the periods at 50 minutes. They're making sure we do not work for 1 minute less. That would never do. That would never do. Despite the fact we're already working, in many cases, twice as long, twice as many hours in front of a classroom than many of our peers on the continent. So this chart, I think, provides an important insight into what's happening in Scottish education today, particularly the problems that are faced on a daily basis by teachers. We are standing in front of children in classrooms far more than our peers on the continent. Now, this is where the heavy lifting is done. This is where the challenges lie. This is where the stress can arise. This is where teacher burnout can arise. This is where low morale can arise. This is where the teacher exodus arises. If we assume that Scottish teachers, I think it's fair to assume this, that Scottish teachers are just as highly skilled as teachers on the continent, but the teachers on the continent have got much more time to prepare for their lessons. The standards on the continent will be higher than the standards in Scotland. Does that matter? Yes, it does matter, because education matters. What happens in Scottish education today will determine the sort of future we will eventually inherit when we get there. And if standards are lower than they should be today, the future that we shall eventually find ourselves in will be much more violent, it will be much less fairer, and it will be much less happier than society today. That's why ultimately why schools are here, and this is why we invest in them. But we have grounds for optimism. The Scottish Government have recognised the fundamental nature of this problem and we're so out of sight with other countries that they have pledged to reduce our net teaching time. In the beginning it will be 2 periods a week. Now that's not going to be enough, but it's a start. It will have to reduce, it'll have to be reduced by 6 or 7 periods a week until we are somewhere close to what our continental neighbours are. But that's going to be a very, very difficult thing to do, and it's going to take quite a long time to do that. But that should nevertheless be our vision, and that should be our focus. Thanks for watching the Scottish Physicist. I'm not quite finished with the Attainment Gap quite yet.